What's up, gang? Welcome to the Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius and Joe. I'm so pumped to have you here with me. Now, listen, the Greatness Machine, we're about two things. Number one, people who are living their passions. And number two, those who are creating greatness in the world and doing both of these things despite the odds against them. Each episode, we're going to feature interviews with game changers, business leaders, telling us their origin stories, what made them tick, what got them to where they are now. Why? So it can help you step into your greatness within your life, your business, and your career. Occasionally, you might hear a few solo episodes from myself, moi, as I say, as I leverage my 20 years of entrepreneurship as a CEO and founder to help you grow and level up in your journey to scale your life and your business. So, come be a fly on the wall, enjoy the conversation, and I'm stoked to have you here with me. Guys, welcome to today's episode of The Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius and and boy, do we have special guest. My man, Joe Polish is in the house. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Darius. It is good to be here.
Oh my gosh. So for listeners who are new to the show, you're going to know two things. Number one, the Greatness Machine. We are about people living their passions, and those are creating greatness in the world. And Joe is neither short of passion nor greatness. Now, I just got to say this, Joe. So you've been on my list. I have a hit list. Tiffany knows all about it because I got this list of folks that I'm like, man, I want them on the show. Let's go hit them up. And I found my opening. I interviewed Cameron Harold, whose show is going to be coming out probably right around the time yours comes out for his new book, Second in Command. And we get off the show and I'm like, yeah, man, the show's blowing up right now. We're getting, high rankings on Apple. I said, I'd love if you could make some intros for me. And he's like, well, who do you want me to intro? And I'm like, man, here's my wish list. And you were the first person I named. I was like, I know you're friends with Joe. Like, can you get Joe on the show? And he's like, done. And so right after that, email goes out. And I want to say this, like Cameron's obviously connected with you through Genius Network. We'll talk about that in a second. But it's funny, like when you're like on the periphery of someone else's world and they come up in your world all the time. And you're one of those people like Andre Norman, who's a friend, is always talking about you. I've heard Vern talk about you, Cameron talk about you. Tucker Max, is he Genius Network?
Yeah. Tucker comes in and out. So Tucker will be in, then he'll be out, then he'll come back in and stuff like that. But yes, yeah. I know Tucker very well.
Tucker's a buddy of mine. Hal Elrod's coming on the show. I mean, like, I'm looking at the list. I'm like, Jesus criminy. I'm like, how have I not hung out with Joe yet? Like, we seem to know a lot of the same people. Nick Pearson's part of the network. It's unbelievable. So I'm just so pumped to have you here, man. And I'm so excited to talk about all the stuff you're doing, especially your new book that we'll get into in a second here. But man, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here. Hopefully I can say something that will be useful for whoever's listening to this.
Well, I hope so as well, and I have no doubt it's going to happen. So listen, for listeners who maybe are not familiar with Joe's enormous resume, you were the founder of Genius Network, and for anyone that's been living under a rock, Genius Network is a mastermind that brings together some of the top minds in the world, top entrepreneurs, just people really game changers, I guess is the best word that I could use for people that are a part of your Genius Network. At least those are the people I know. So you're the founder of Genius Network, as well as many other businesses we were talking about before the show, including your 501c3 business. It's not a business; it's a nonprofit, Genius Recovery, which is helping those in the field of recovery from substance abuse. Is that correct?
Yeah, all kinds of addictions, behavioral addictions, be it sex, gambling, work, eating, to drugs, alcohol. Genius Recovery.
Love it. And you are the creator of the documentary Connected, the Joe Polish story, which premiered at the TCL Chinese Theater. It's funny, I'm from Southern California, so I'm like, is that the Man's Chinese Theater? I had to go look it up to make sure I didn't screw it up.
It is. They changed the name, but it's funny. It's still the original Chinese theater.
Very cool. And most importantly, we're going to be talking about your new book. And I just want to say this, having been someone that published a book 2 years ago, you made the Wall Street Journal's best-selling for your new book, What's in It for Them? 9 Genius Networking Principles to Get What You Want by Helping Others Get What They Want. Man, huge congratulations on the Wall Street Journal bestsellers list. That's a massive accomplishment, man.
Thank you. Yeah.
So
I'm happy about it, and people like it, so it's good. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's a huge honor to have you on the show to talk about the work, and I'm really excited to dive into all the work you're doing, specifically the book. The book's out there. It's making the list. It's changing people's lives. So before we go into that, though, here at the Greatness Machine, we love origin stories. I'd love if you could maybe take a step back and tell us your origin story. Like, how did you get to where you get to get to this point right now where you were able to create all this value in the world?
Well, thanks. And let me also say, do you prefer right from birth onward, or go right into my how I got into my business? Because I can give you all kinds of versions.
Yeah, you know what? I think take us back. Let's go early. Let's go a little childhood if you want, if you don't mind, and then we'll take it in the business, because I think what makes a person, I think when we understand what people's contextually what they're doing by what they came from, that helps, I think, tell the story. So would love to hear a little bit of the background.
Yeah, and I listened to one of your recent podcasts that yesterday that you did, and so I imagine you and your listeners have probably heard lots of different origin stories, and so. Let me kind of say it this way. One of my Genius Network members is a guy named Dr. Don Wood, and he is a trauma therapist. He's now in his 60s. He used to be a hockey player, and I met him when both of us were speaking at the Spartan World Championships. I think that was 2019, before the pandemic and everything, and he said some really interesting stuff about addiction. And me and him got to talking about it, and I gave him my viewpoint, and he really agreed with my perspective on it, which is different than most of the world's. And so we became friends. He ultimately ended up, becoming part of my group and all that jazz. And I write about him in my new book. And one of the things that he says, and this has to do with origin stories, is if you understood the atmospheric conditions of somebody's life, it would make sense why it is they do what it is they do. And I've always liked that framing, because I am the way I am because of certain things that happen. Same with you, same with people that do good things, bad things. And since I spend about half my time with people that struggle with addiction, I often think about what are their atmospheric conditions. And I believe that even if someone's atmospheric conditions are good or bad, we have the ability to alter our atmosphere. And if we do that, we then change whoever influences us, whoever we influence, who we come into contact with. So the things that sort of created me to do what it is I do today, going back, I was raised Catholic. My mother died when I was 4 years old. I'll be 55 years old in February of next year. So my mom died, over 50 years ago at this point. And she was an amazing woman. She wrote some of the first books teaching children how to read using the phonetic method. Millions of children have been taught to read with my mom's books. I don't have any recollection of my mother's voice. I don't know what she sounded like. I only have a couple of memories of her. One was in the hospital when she was, I don't know if it was the day before she died, the day she died, a week before she died, but it was very close around that time. And, it was very sad. And I remember when my mother died, my father outside lost it. I mean, he was crying, he was bawling, and it was a very vague, sort of fuzzy memory, but I do remember that. And most of my childhood, even going up into my teens, was very fuzzy. I mean, I only have a handful of really strong memories, and I have a lot of it's a bit of a blur. I mean, I have a lot of memories, but they're very blurred out. And the reason is my childhood was pretty crazy. My father did the best he could, but when my mom died, he was traumatized and he never recovered from it.
Yeah.
So, and I was raised in a very guilt-ridden sort of environment and environments. My mother was a former nun. She left. Yeah. So, and it's funny. I'll often say that to people, and immediately I'm like, I know all the nun jokes. You can tell me nuns can't get pregnant. I know all that stuff. I've heard it all. She left the convent, because she had gotten ill, and she met my father in church, and they ended up falling in love, and, they got married, and they had 2 kids. So I have an older brother. And after my mom died of ovarian cancer, my father could never settle down anywhere. So every year, every 2 years, my entire childhood, we would move uproot to another place. And I was very introverted. And whenever I started even having a couple of friends, a handful of friends and relationships, we would uproot and go to a new school. And it was just so difficult, when you're really kind of a shy person, to have to meet new people. And I was small. I was a scrawny kid. I was not into sports because my liking of sports were actually, first off, never developed. And secondly, when I tried to play Little League, I had a sadistic baseball coach that would force me to hold the baseball bat in a certain way, and I couldn't hit the ball, and I ended up quitting the team because I couldn't play the game. And then all the kids started picking on me and beating me up and bullying me. So I just, all that stuff. I got bullied a lot. I got picked on a lot. And then, when I was between the ages of 8 to 10 to, I started getting molested. And so I was,
Jesus Christ.
I won't go deep into that. Just anything that I share, I often try to caution. I can tell difficult things. Everybody has had difficult things. I say this not to minimize what happened to me because it was pretty awful. I was raped and molested as a kid. I was paid money not to say anything. It left me in a place of, shame and feeling like, just a worthless human because of what was done to me. And it was awful. So I don't say that though to evoke any sort of, poor person sort of thing. Nor do I say it to, not to maximize or minimize it. I try to look at all of this in context, and I've done a boatload of therapy and I've done a lot of work, and I've been in recovery for over 2 decades because, that childhood left me to first using drugs and alcohol quite heavily as a teenager. My worst state of drug addiction was the age of 18 years old. It really was heavy, 16 years to, 18 years where I was smoking pot daily in high school. I used to keep a bong in my locker when it was easier to get away with that. Although now they're legalizing, drugs.
Yeah, they all have vapes now. Like I always say, like the Gen Z, man, they have it so easy. Like they didn't have to hide a fucking bong in their locker like Joe did. Porn. You had to go steal videotapes of porn back in our day. Like these guys, they just download it. They got a little vape pens, like getting high, watching porn. So easy these days to be a hoodlum.
Yeah, it's a lot more accessible, and even with the so that's a whole nother story. We'll talk about connection and disconnection, electronics, and everything. I have all kinds of perspectives on that if you want to go down that path. So, I was getting high, and and I was a real shy, introverted kid. And the weird thing was when I started partying, it opened up inhibitions, and I actually became popular, and I was able to sort of shed a lot of these fears that I had about interacting and engaging with people. And I wasn't in the sports. I wasn't, academically strong. I wasn't in music class. I wasn't in theater. I mean, I was just some guy that got not very good grades, not terrible grades, but I was just a very mediocre sort of student. But I started partying, and it somehow opened me up, and I could feel alive. And part of it is because from all the trauma, I've become good friends with people like Dr. Gabor Mate and, some of the top addiction and mental experts, Ned Hollowell, the top ADD, ADHD psychiatrist in the world. He's writing a chapter on his, I think, 23rd book. This is a Harvard trained, psychiatrist. He's written 22, 23 books, and his latest book has a whole chapter on addiction, and half the chapters are all about me, all about my story. So I've done a lot of work to sort of understand this and look at trauma, but I was lacking dopamine. I was traumatized. I mean, I was just looking for ways. What humans want is more woo and less ah. I mean, that's what it boils down to. So if you have a lot of depression, a lot of addiction, a lot of loneliness, sadness, and it's not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens to you. So if you're a kid and you've been abused, or you've been abandoned, or you've been neglected, and you could have physical abuse, mental abuse, you could witness, horrendous things. There's all kinds of ways that trauma could manifest itself. There's nothing wrong with wanting to get out of pain or getting out of angst. It's how you scratch the itch. And if you can't fight back, if you can't ask for help, and if you can't run away, then you repress those emotions, and that trauma, internalized and unexpressed, will either come out with disease or it'll come out with addiction. And so addiction for me became a solution to pain. I didn't even know that. I didn't have language about it at the time. For me, it was just trying to party and feel good. But now looking back at, now that I've become very aware of some of the causes of these, ways of feeling as a human, biochemistry, serotonin, dopamine, things that just simply make you feel good. I get a better understanding of, I was just trying to get to a place of more woo. And so
can I ask you a question? Can I stop you
absolutely,
for a
yeah.
second? One question is, so it sounds like you obviously moved around a lot as a kid. You didn't have I guess a sense of belonging, right? Because like kids, especially kids, when we talked about this off air. I have a twin brother, and I was kind of like the athlete scholar, and then my brother wasn't an athlete, didn't get good grades, and he turned to partying. That was an open invitation for him, right? It's
Right.
actually something he could be good at, right?
Yeah.
He got lucky and found sales right around the same time, but which ended up being probably his savior from abusing drugs too much. But what I found was that allowed escape, because when you aren't, at least as a kid, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this, because I watched it. People would come to me and they're like, "What's wrong with your brother?" And I'm like, "I'm 12 years old. Why are you asking me what's wrong with my 12-year-old brother?" Like that, I'm a kid, right? And this was like a common theme from like 12 to 17, because I was on the other end of the spectrum where I got accolades and shit for doing the things that kids are supposed to do. With my brother, on the other hand, it was like he didn't have that ability to get positive reinforcement. And so with him, it was easy to go into something that people would celebrate and a way to feel belonging. For you, is it kind of the same deal where you're like, oh, I'm not a great student, I'm not a good athlete, well, I could go do this thing, I get attention, people like me, my inhibitions go down. What was it specifically for you in that?
I mean, yeah, I guess in some ways, if you are not feeling good or feeling connected with anything that you can get either internal or external validation or a dopamine hit per se,
right?
And you look and seek out things that will do that. So oftentimes people can go into gaming because in isolation they still are electronically being stimulated, right? They're looking for that way to metaphorically scratch the itch. And so for me, I wasn't good at much, but I felt better when I got high until I didn't anymore. So what ended up happening with me I went from one of the shyest, no one knew who I was, getting picked last on the team sort of stuff. I mean, that shit really happened to me all the time, to becoming one of the most popular kids in my high school, to also overdoing it very quickly. I mean, in my senior year of high school, I had become quite popular, and it wasn't because of any sports or any academic stuff. It was simply because I was really social and good at partying. And I went from being super shy and scared to talk to people to realizing like, wow, if you can open yourself up, you can go and interact. And there was this constant judgment on myself until I inebriated myself enough to not have it bother me. But the problem was, it's kind of like a fake level of confidence. It's a bit like candy, the sugar high will keep you going, but it's not really true nourishment. It's sort of disguised. But I felt connected, even though it wasn't a real authentic connection. I felt connected to at least joy and a bit of peace. And I do remember this. The only thing that allowed my brain to escape when I was feeling that constant pressure and angst was either getting high or doing ceramics. And I took 3 years of advanced ceramics in high school, and it was art. And it was interesting because one of the things that I've created, I started it in 2015, and it's finally getting momentum, is artistforaddicts.com is actually the website. Artists with an S, F-O-R, addicts with an S, artistforaddicts.com. And I started going back to, being in high school. I spoke to a group of artists and I told my whole story. And I'm not an expert in marketing art. That's a very sort of interesting field, right? And I can't even read my own handwriting. The only talented skill I've ever had in art is throwing pots on a pottery wheel. And I reconnected with a guy who became a professional, brilliant, talented ceramic artist that I've known since high school. One of the few people I still even know since high school that I hang out with, named Joe Woodford. And he invited me to this big art thing called Celebration of Fine Arts that they do in Scottsdale, Arizona every year. And I went and met the owner, founder of this, and she asked me if I would speak to their group of artists, which I normally don't do, but she had read an article about me in like Success Magazine and stuff. So this is back in literally 2015. And I spoke to these artists and I told them my story about how I was in high school. Through pottery, and if someone types in my name, Joe Polish, art, they can actually watch that talk. I actually published it on YouTube.
Nice.
Me speaking to this group of artists for like an hour, and 6 men came up to me. One was a woman. 6 people came up to me when I was done talking, and telling me about how impactful art was to them feeling connected in the world. And one man had tears in his eyes, and he said, "If it wasn't for art, I would be dead." And that's when I started thinking, why not go to the people that seem to struggle and suffer the most with this, which is people in the arts. It could be music, it could be writing, it could be entrepreneurship, because what is life? What are you doing right now? Darius, you have a podcast, right?
Right.
And you are expressing yourself through thoughts, ideas, entrepreneurship. It's expression. Every form of human life is expression. People are dancing, people are talking, people are doing art, they're singing, they're expressing, and they're either reacting and being out of control, or they're responding to life. Like when my life works, I'm responding to life, which is responding with ability. That's being responsible. Or when I'm reacting to life, I'm in pain, I'm in angst. And so when I was doing ceramics, it was a form of expression for me, but it really connected me with something that I could get into. I actually sort of forgot about time, and I was in that place. Well, drugs seem to do the same thing, but they mimicked it. It wasn't a real thing per se. Did I feel better? Absolutely. And I'm not here to say pro drugs or anti-drugs. It's a tool, and it could be used for good or bad. I mean, I can point to, in most cases, I'm a person that believes you cannot punish pain out of people. So right now, the criminal justice system is treating addicts, and it needs to be a more compassionate industry. And it certainly isn't police officers or courts or prison guards or, any sort of like these people are moral degenerates. So that's at least my viewpoint. Like my friend Gabor Mate says, the question is not why the addiction, but why the pain. So if you understand abusive stuff, oftentimes is just an attempt to self-soothe. That's all I was trying to do. I was trying to self-soothe. But the thing with art, it didn't make any sense till many years later that, wow, oftentimes if you said your brother got into sales, right? Well, here's the thing. Most people that become self-destructive or go down certain paths, it's usually a response to some sort of repressed emotions, hormones, biochemical imbalances in their body. Something just doesn't feel right. And we find interesting ways to, quote unquote, occupy our time, or to do certain things for a living, or how to connect. And so what the good parts was, it actually showed me that I could feel better. The bad parts were I didn't have any other alternative. I did, but I didn't have enough consciousness and enough awareness and enough guidance as a kid. I didn't stick with arts. I just went into drugs. And
so hold on, let me just stop you there. So the art was an escape. The drugs were an escape. And as you had mentioned earlier, for the first, up until 2 decades ago, this was a battle that you had not really kind of overcome. What was the precipice that got you to? I mean, in high school, it's one thing. It's usually people are that age. They're not like, oh, I got to go straighten my life up. At that point, you're kind of in it, right? And I've seen this go for people into their 20s. Most of my friends who have been through recovery, it's usually in their 30s when they kind of find recovery. For you, what was it that kind of turned your life around?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I didn't find full recovery or any of that for many years because my core addiction was sex addiction. The drugs were just sort of a bit of a Band-Aid, not a good Band-Aid, because I often say drugs are the solution. They're not the problem. The addiction is not the problem. The addiction is the solution. It's a solution that has lots of problems attached to it. It is, it can kill you. It can hurt other people. It can make your life completely, screwed up. You leave a lot of shrapnel with anyone that surrounds you. Most addicts, if they're deep in addiction, lie, cheat, and steal. They leave a lot of shrapnel. So it's no productive way to live. And in many ways, it can be complete. and utter chaos. I mean, you know, the night of my high school graduation, I watched my graduating class walk, you know, it was on a football field at a place, Dobson High School in Mesa, Arizona, which is where I went to high school. And I watched over the fence of a friend's house who bordered the, you know, the football field where everyone was graduating, and we were freebasing cocaine while my high school class was graduating. I just was very anti. And then after that, I spent 3.5 months straight, every single day, smoking cocaine, freebasing cocaine. And I'd gotten, my average weight was around 105 pounds. And if you're, you know, if you're a male at 18 years old and you're 5'10", that's my height, and you weigh 105 pounds, you could imagine that, well, my average weight was 120 pounds. In 1 week, I had not eaten almost like nothing. I'd like eaten some fast food a couple of times, but I was doing drugs like heavily the whole week, crystal meth, like a lot of amphetamines. And I had gotten, I weighed myself, and I'd gotten as low as 105 pounds 1 week. I was like, and I looked in the mirror and I looked like a skeleton. And people at the time, they'd be like, man, you really need to do something. You know, it's not like no one was saying shit to me. I just didn't hear it. And when you're completely mired in addiction, you're not operating as a rational person. I mean, your consciousness is in a whole nother place. At that point, it's about survival. I would wake up to get high, and I would get high to go to bed. You know, it was uppers in the morning, downers, and drinking and stuff at night. And my whole life consisted around that. And the way I got out of it was, I won't go into the whole long story. I actually write about it in my book a bit. You know, it had gotten so bad that one person that I was living with, a roommate, well, I had 2 roommates, came home one day and nearly set the whole house on fire. And at that point, I was like, if I don't get out of here, I'm gonna be dead. And I packed up the few belongings I had. I drove a piece of shit truck, little Chevy Love, if you remember those pickup trucks, to Las Cruces, New Mexico. And I lived in a trailer for 2 years with my father, and I got sober. The first 6 months were grueling. It was no rehab. It was no treatment. It was taking Tylenol and aspirin every day and basically removing myself from every connection I had to get drugs. And if you cut off the source, you know, did I want to get high? Yes. Was I having withdrawals, severe withdrawals? The mental headaches every day, the mental anguish, the physical toll. But, you know, I'd really damaged my body. You know, I would blow my nose and little pieces of flesh would come out from the membranes that were damaged from the snorting, you know, cocaine and crystal. And I burnt a hole in one of the molars, my bottom tooth, luckily only one. I don't know how the other teeth somehow, it's the weirdest thing. Like I had one back molar that literally I burned a hole in it from smoking coke. But the other ones, the other teeth somehow weren't affected. It's weird shit like that. But I eventually ended up getting a job in a health club selling gym memberships. And that was my first exposure to sales. That was my first exposure to exercise. And I started working out and I started lifting weights. And then you realize the issues are in the tissues. There's a lot to be said about the somatic aspects of trauma. And I met a guy that ran a mental hospital. He offered me a job and I became a mental health tech. And after I left the job at the gym, I would worked as a mental health tech. And for a period of time, I would drive the patients, many that were there for all kinds of things, you know, from suicidal to all kinds of mental stuff, but there was people there for drugs. And so I would drive the people that were there for drugs to AA meetings, Alcoholics Anonymous, NA meetings, Narcotics Anonymous, CA meetings, Cocaine Anonymous. And I would drive them there and I would sit in these meetings as an employee that was just driving all of the patients to sit in on this offsite 12-step meeting, although there were some on-site 12-step meetings at this facility. And I would listen to these people tell their stories. And that was my first exposure to 12 steps, and which is, you know, great for community for addicts. And
how old were you?
Well, that was 19 at the end of 19. You know, I still lived in Arizona for a little bit out of high school because I was still, I turned 18 when I was in high school. So that was, I don't know the exact month. I should actually look that up when I first went to New Mexico. But I was, you know, 19, and then I moved back to Arizona when I was 22. but I was up there for a couple of years. And when I came back, by the time I went there, I was a total wreck. I mean, I was skinny, I was scrawny. When I had finally come back, I weighed about 35 pounds more than when I first showed up. I was ripped. I was in killer physical shape. I had gotten completely sober from drugs. I would drink a little bit, even though alcohol's a drug. So let me be, just on my language, most people don't think of alcohol as a drug. It is a drug. Caffeine is a drug. The number one killer of people of substances or related to substances in America, and in most countries that eat like Americans, which is now most of the world that you would call quote unquote civilized, the number one killer is sugar first, tobacco second, alcohol third, and opiates fourth. And so I was not doing opiates. I was not doing, cocaine. I was not doing crystal, but I would drink once in a while. I wasn't a heavy drinker. But I also wasn't a quote unquote social drinker. I mean, I still you drink and you get a buzz. And this is, we're talking, I graduated high school in 1986. So, we're talking late 80s, and that was
sure
the decade of cocaine, right?
Yeah, no, that was the decade, right? So
totally.
So what, it sounds like you kind of use this as a ability to kind of ground yourself and recover. I saw that you started your first company in 1994.
Yeah.
What got you into the world of entrepreneurism?
Well, I actually started my first carpet cleaning business in 1990. So I came back from New Mexico, got a couple of jobs, and ended up having a friend talk me into starting a carpet cleaning business. And so I did. And after the first 2 months of starting this carpet cleaning business with all the money I'd saved up, and my first job in New Mexico, I passed this by this one, was delivering papers. When I first got there, it was delivering papers in a pickup truck. It was an adult paper route. They weren't like kids on bicycles delivering physical papers. It was adults doing it. And it was a late night job. I was used to being nocturnal because when I was a drug addict, I would stay up all night, right? And that helped get me through college. That ended up leading. I did that for a period of time, and then I ended up getting the job at the health club. And that's when I got into physical exercise. So during my time of the worst, withdrawals, my job was delivering papers late at night, and I was by myself, and it was dark out. It was the weirdest damn thing. I mean, I look back in my life, it almost seems like just completely compartmentalized and bizarre and surreal, but I learned a tremendous amount. One, if you're in an environment that is very triggering, get the hell out of it, because if I would have stayed in Arizona at the time, willpower would not have worked. Every one of my relationships was pretty much with people that were partying and doing drugs. And when you're around people that do drugs, you consume drugs, you trade drugs, you deal drugs, your whole life is around that, depending on the depth of it. And I'm not talking about people that party every once in a while. I'm talking about a daily activity, and everything you do is built around it. Chris Rock had some skit years ago where he talked about, a crackhead's not married to someone that wakes up and puts on a 3-piece suit at 5 a.m. and goes to work. They're hanging out with other crackheads, right? So, it's one of those things. And so I got off the drugs. What I never dealt with, and that didn't resurface, it took a couple of years, but it was a sexual addiction. And sex addiction, that stemmed from everyone, whatever they're into sexually, has an arousal template, usually that is based in their childhood. Whenever someone is first exposed to sexuality, whatever they're into and whatever they desire is created for their first stimulating sexual experience, or one of their early sexual experiences. So when you see whatever people are into, it's their atmospheric conditions. It's based on what they're exposed to. So because I was exposed to sexuality in such a shaming way, I never saw sex as an intimate act of love and oneness. My father never remarried. I didn't have a mother growing up. I was raised by my father. And so I never had any models of a true loving relationship. So I didn't know how to do relationships. I was deeply scared of relationships. I didn't know how to ask women out. So I had a few experiences, but not a lot. And they're with, basically, you find people whose dents match your dents. I mean, that's just how people are. And if you're not in a good place, you're going to attract or seek out someone that just kind of fits your current level of consciousness. So, I did have some good, some good partners and whatnot, but some that were just toxic as hell. And part of it is because I was toxic as hell, right? And so I needed to really work that through. So what was interesting, and this will be for a much longer thing, because I do want to get into some business stuff that will be helpful as it relates to this. Just suffice it to say, I had a lot to learn. I did start studying marketing though. And because I became a carpet cleaner and I was living off credit cards. And there was this part of me that was like, I didn't want to work for anyone and I wanted to figure out how to make business work. And the best thing is that I can say is instructional is that when you can find something to connect to that allows your brain to engage, that is a creative resource that creates value for yourself and others, and you can kind of jump on that horse, metaphorically speaking, and ride it, then that is awesome. And that's what one should seek out. And I realized that, so here I was in this business, this carpet cleaning business, selling something that nobody wants to buy. So people often, I ended up, building, in the 90s, I built the largest training organization on direct response marketing in the world for professional carpet and upholstery cleaners and people that do fire and flood restoration, which eventually led to over 12,000 cleaning and restoration companies all over the world.
Wow.
That became members of Piranha Marketing, which was my, first parent company. And then I started licensing my marketing materials to HVAC, printers, painters, florists, jewelers, hair and nail salons, pest control, all these different niche industries based on my marketing things. But the first 2 years of my carpet cleaning business, I went about $30,000 in debt. I had no idea that I would one day teach people, write books, write courses, speak. All of that was accidental. It actually happened because I was forced to figure out how to pay my bills and how to survive. And so I was stuck with this carpet cleaning business when I had become partners with this guy. And after 2 months of us becoming partners, he was getting drunk every night. It became a worthless business partner. I had taken the money I had saved in New Mexico from delivering papers, working at a gym, and I came to Arizona. I moved back to Arizona, integrated back into some friendships as best I could, even though that was, we could do a sitcom just on that shit. But I ended up buying this carpet cleaning equipment, and here I was with a card that said professional carpet and upholstery cleaner, and I had this, I had this business. And so what ended up happening was I studied marketing and I fell in love with it. I was like, wow. I'll tell you one instructive story. This will kind of summarize a lot of stuff, and then we can kind of tie it together. There was a point in my business where I was so frustrated, I wanted to get the hell out of the business. And
this is the carpet cleaning business?
Yeah, the carpet cleaning business. My first actual real business was the carpet cleaning business. And, I did some other stuff and other jobs, but my first real business was my carpet cleaning business. And I'd been doing this for about 2 years. I had gotten certified. I was trained. I didn't do bait and switch advertising. I was a good carpet cleaner. I cared about people. There were people out there running, $5.95 a room, low price coupons, using high pressure selling. I didn't do any of that. Along the way, I had somehow managed to acquire what I felt was some pretty good morality and a good, ethical system of operating. I don't know how and where that came from, because my models growing up were fucking terrible. I mean, they really were. But I somehow learned early on that, karmically, life gives to the giver and takes from the taker. The title of my book, What's in It for Them, if you walk around the world thinking what's in it for me, then you're going to give off a taker energy. You're going to be an opportunist. Like I always tell people, there's nothing wrong with opportunities. Everyone listening to this podcast has opportunities, and they're hoping that hearing something from you or from one of the people you interview is going to help them reach their opportunities and maybe give them capabilities or maybe give them insights. Everybody wants something. We all want something. But my whole thing is, like, if you want something, there's nothing wrong with wanting something. But if you're asking somebody to give you something, make sure that your give is equal to or greater than your want. And there's nothing wrong with with utilizing people and collaborating, but there's a big difference between someone utilizing you and using you. So I don't want to use people. I don't want people to, like, the people that annoy us are the takers of the world. You know, they don't care. And there's a big difference between an opportunity versus an opportunist. There's really true, authentic connecting, and then there's connecting. And there's a lot of connectors out there that they connect with people by conning them, by trying to act like they care about them and all that sort of stuff. So, I was working really hard, doing the very best job I could, delivering value, because all money earned ethically is a byproduct of value creation, cleaning carpets. But the problem is there's no relationship between being good and getting paid. Yeah, there's, so the thing with my business, I was frustrated because here I was working really hard, doing a good job, and I was broke. And it's like, what the hell? You watch people that are out there that seem to be doing well in the world, sometimes ripping people off, doing a shoddy job, and you're like, I don't get it. Is life not fair? And the answer to that is no, life is not fair. The key, though, is what the hell do you do about it?
Right.
So I had a friend call me up when I was, in the middle of the toughest time trying to make this business work, broke, living off credit cards, hardly any money, just, living, literally paying money to survive. I would say later that there's many ways to go broke. Working hard manual labor, cleaning carpets is one of the stupidest ways to go broke. There's far more intelligent ways to go broke. You can sit on the couch and watch TV at the time, because there was no internet back then. And that's a far more fun way to go broke than to do hard manual labor cleaning carpets.
Sure.
And so a friend called me up. He's like, you want to go jet skiing on a weekend? And I'm like, nah, I'm busy. I got work to do. And he's like, well, the guy that owns the jet skis is this multi-million-dollar real estate investor. And that piqued my interest. I'm like, I immediately thought, here's an opportunity for me to talk to some rich guy. Maybe I can learn what business to go into, because I certainly hated the business I was in. So I ended up going on, I'm going to give you the short version of this for timing. I went on this jet ski trip, and there was my friend I went to high school with, and then two other guys, the guy that owned the jet skis and one of his friends. And so finally there were, Pat, my friend, and this rich guy's other friend were on the two jet skis. And I had an opportunity to sit down with this rich guy. I wish I knew his name, because he ended up being one of the most important, what I now call dominoes. Who's the first domino? Be it a book, be it a person that changes the trajectory of your life. And so I finally had a chance to sit down with this guy. I never remembered his name. And I was talking with him, and I said, I hear you do really well and in real estate and stuff. And I have a small carpet cleaning business, and it's a difficult business. I've been doing it for a couple of years, and I was wondering if you have any suggestions. I'm young, I was in my early 20s, of another business or industry that I could go into where I could, do better. And he said, well, he goes, is there other people in your business that are doing well? And I said, yeah, there's a couple of companies in, Phoenix area that make over $1 million a year. And at the time, to me, that was a lot of money. And he said, well, I go, but, they've been in business for a while, they're established. He goes, well, if there's other people that are in your industry doing well and you're not, there's nothing wrong with the business you're in. There's something wrong with you. And I said, and I was like, this is not the motivational speech I was looking for.
Thanks, man.
And so I said, no, I go, I'm certified. I'd gotten trained. I went through the whole thing about how I, I'd literally become the Arizona director of the Carpet and Fabric Care Institute. I used to bring all the educational courses to Arizona on how to clean carpets and fiber identification, pH levels of chemistry, just volunteer work, just to try to hang out with other people. I mean, I was really always a student of try to find who the hell is doing something well and learn from that. So, reading books, like Abe Lincoln, I'm self-taught. I mean, I never got a degree in anything. Even though I went to New Mexico State, it was really to get sober. I never got a degree. I ended up going to Chandler Gilbert Community College, and I got a C- in principles of marketing, and I failed owning and operating a small business. I've now spoken to Stanford University twice, and I'm funding a research study on connection and addiction at Stanford. And it's funny because I would tell the students there that you guys are all so much smarter than me. I mean, I failed owning and operating a small business, and now I became a millionaire though by the time I was 30 years old, and I have run multi-million-dollar businesses for years. But that means nothing, because if you give a lot of money to someone that hasn't dealt with their core addictions, you can buy any sort of vice that your twisted brain can come up with. So, having money is only a tool to a degree on how you use it, even though it is important. And I certainly never poo-poo money. So anyway, going back to this jet ski trip, the guy's like, well, he goes, you're like most people. I told him I'd gotten certified, I'd gotten trained. I don't do bait and switch advertising like some companies do. He goes, well, you're like most people. You think the grass is always greener on the other side. He goes, so here's what I'll tell you, young man. He goes, if you want to go into another business or another industry, you're going to spend another 6 months, another year, another 2 years learning the technical skills of another industry so you can go out and repeat the same bad business habits that have caused you to be a failure in this one. And I'm just like, shit. So he said, what you need to do is you need to learn fundamental business skills. And because then when you do, once you learn how to make a business work, you can then take those principles and apply it to any other industry. And that's what I did. So when I left that trip, I had a instant paradigm shift. And I thought to myself, I was super sunburned. I remember driving home. I had a bad sunburn, but I remember thinking, I live in America. I have a ton of personal problems. I have a lot of anxiety. I have a lot of stress in my life, but I'm a hard worker and I am driven and I care about doing stuff. And I think I'm a good person. When I say I think, I would question, because I still was struggling with addiction issues. I had not dealt with the childhood trauma anywhere near like I have today. Back then I was still just trying to survive, and just, it was a very hard sort of time in my life. Many years of my life were very, very difficult. Even when I had become financially successful, it wasn't until I discovered other things later. But I made a commitment to myself that I'm not going to get out of this carpet cleaning business till I figure out how to make it work. All of a sudden, what I hated became a lab rat experiment for me to figure out, because I said, other people are doing well, doing this, and I'm not. They know something I don't. What the hell do I need to learn? And that's what opened me up to first learn. Now, I didn't have any answers yet in marketing. It led to reading some books, leading to other things. And then eventually a friend gave me a newsletter written by this crazy copywriter named Gary Halbert, who ended up later becoming one of my dear friends. And I started learning how to write copy, how to write sales copy. And I created, my first consumer's guide to carpet cleaning. And I realized one of the best ways to sell services is to educate people on how to make a buying decision, because the number one question in all consumers' minds is, who can you trust? And so not only did I create really effective education-based marketing, I started using 24-hour free recorded messages that would work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I learned how to, because selling is what you do when you're on the phone or face-to-face with somebody. And marketing is what you do to get someone on the phone or face-to-face with you, properly positioned. So by the time they're talking to you, they're pre-interested, pre-motivated, pre-qualified, and predisposed to do business with you. And I learned how to ethically market high prices. I ended up becoming the biggest advocate against bait and switch advertising in the carpet cleaning industry. I even, back in 1999, I went on ABC's 2020 with an investigative reporter at the time named Arnold Diaz, and Barbara Walters was hosting the show. And we did it was an undercover thing exposing bait and switch carpet cleaners. And I started teaching consumers how not to get ripped off. And I started, teaching the carpet cleaners to have pride in what you're doing. When you walk into a home, it's not about low price. It's about creating value. And we transformed the lives of many carpet and upholstery cleaners. And that was my first introduction into teaching, seminars, education. And then I started doing coaching groups and mastermind groups starting in 1998. So I've been, I'm one of the OGs in the mastermind world. And so was it for small to medium business marketing and growth? Was that what the masterminds were based around? It was literally niched to carpet cleaners. Oh, so, specifically for carpet cleaners. Oh, very cool. It started out just for carpet cleaners. And then I licensed my marketing stuff to other industries. Now, I would get people that would join my group that weren't per se carpet cleaners, but most of them were in service businesses. So one of the first ones was a guy named Dan Benamos, who actually built the largest independent pharmacy owners group back in the 90s. And he ended up selling that company for, I think $35 million. Wow. But, then, and I had everyone from single person operators to even Stan Dubin, who owns the largest privately held contract cleaning company in the United States. They've got to be a $650-750 million a year business right now. And I just saw Stan a couple months ago. But, basically I had everyone, every size of, and then ultimately it wasn't until I did for almost 10 years, I did nothing but niche specific training. And I took on a few consultants. One of my first early big clients was a guy named Bill Phillips, who wrote a book called Body for Life in the late 90s. And that book, that book exists because of our consulting together. And
no way.
He became the largest sports supplement company in the world at the time, which is a company called EAS. He ended up, I gave him an idea that made him the largest individual contributor in the history of the world to the Make-A-Wish Foundation by donating money for people that liked the movie that he made called Body of Work, which you can to this day watch that movie on YouTube. It was made in the late 90s, but
I was a huge Bill Phillips fan. I was an avid buyer of EAS products in college, which is in the late 90s. So I totally know everything you're talking about. So,
well, you know what? You'll like it in my book then. As you get further into my book, towards the end of it, I actually tell the whole Bill Phillips story in my book.
Oh my God, I'm so pumped. I have your book. I haven't gotten to it yet, but it's on my list, so I'm excited to read it. So yeah, let's jump to. I mean, obviously that was the foray into this mastermind, and that I'm guessing that was kind of the doorway to the Genius Network. Could you mind kind of walking us to that?
Yeah, first Genius Network originally was an interview series. So back in the I think it's 1996, I was publishing a marketing newsletter for my clients, and my company was Piranha Marketing. And what was interesting is I had not written my newsletter in time, and it was like getting close to, it was going to be late. And I was like, shit. So I interviewed someone on sales and persuasion on a cassette tape, because back then they were cassette tapes. There were no podcasts. Today they're podcasts. I recorded my first podcast, believe it or not, in 2005. No one even knew what the hell a podcast was. And then in 2010, I started the I Love Marketing podcast with Dean Jackson. We've tried to find the before the episode, the edited episode with Tim Ferriss, where me and Dean are trying to, we've had Tim on our show a few times. And we were both saying to him, you need to really do a podcast. And Tim's like, I don't think that's a good idea. I don't want to really. Like, yeah, dude, you wrote a couple of books. People love them. You have a big blog following. I mean, a podcast would be, no, I don't know. And then of course, Tim
blows up. Yeah, that's amazing.
We're trying to find that footage of, us talking to him and trying to start a podcast. But anyway, so back then there were no podcasts, but they were cassette tapes. So they're called interviews. And I interviewed someone on sales and persuasion, and I mailed it to all of my newsletter subscribers and all of my clients that would buy my training courses. And the feedback I got was so enormous that I was like, well, I should start sending out interviews. So we started sounds so egotistical, and I do everything I can nowadays to not, I don't want to be a guru. I don't even like fame. I don't want anyone to think anyone's special. Even when people ask me for pictures and autographs and shit like that, which I'll occasionally get at events, I'll say to them, more so as self-deprecating humor, I'm like, if you knew how many personal problems I have, you would not be asking me for, because I don't want people to feel like anyone is like super special. I mean, I want people to feel good about themselves, right? And so I had the Joe Polish Superstar Audio Tape of the Month program, which I thought is just funny. But, this is a shit.
That's amazing.
When you're in your late 20s and going to your early 30s. And we would send out a cassette tape. And eventually I was talking with Gary Halbert, and I'm like, I need to come up with a better name for the Joe Polish Superstar Audio Tape series. And I go, I don't like how it sounds. I mean, I'm interviewing superstars, but it just sounds kind of weird. And it sounds like, so we came up with Genius Network. And I was like, the Genius Network interview series. It was never a group. It was never, and it started as a mastermind group. And it was one of the original high-end mastermind groups. And it's definitely known for that. I mean, it is definitely known as one of the top entrepreneurial groups in the world right now. I don't even consider it a mastermind group anymore. It started out that way, but it first started as an interview series. And I would always call people up, and here's what's really funny about this, man. I mean, just doing this with you right now made me think about this. I remember doing a brainstorm session at my house. I had a house in Tempe, Arizona. I now live in Paradise Valley, Arizona, in my office, my Genius Network headquarters, where we hold the meetings, and all my businesses are run as an 11,000 square foot building in Tempe, Arizona. And I had Brian Tracy came to one of my first meetings, and I would have Sean Phillips and different John Carlton and Gary Halbert and different copywriters. I would invite them, Eben Pagan, different people that are these old school marketers. I would invite them to, come, and we'd have meetings either at my office or at my house. And we would do these one-offs, and then people would be like, when are you going to do one of those meetings again? That was awesome. That was great. Now we're doing these like groups, and I always loved doing it. And I had started a group called Platinum Plus, and I started giving away cars. I was one of the first people to do these Better Your Best contests, and I taught that to many other marketers. And at the time, Dan Kennedy, the marketer, was writing a lot of my sales copy, and he tried to talk me out of one of the very high-end $10,000 a person coaching groups. He's like, it's too much money. You're going to get a lot of complaints. But I had joined a group called Strategic Coach in 1997.
Yeah, Dan's Holland.
Yeah, Dan is a dear friend. We do a podcast together called 10X Talk, and I have been in his group since 1997. And I'm still to this day the highest referring person to Strategic Coach. And he's been in my group, Genius Network, since 2010. So he's in my 100K group, and I'm still in his group. And, it's not an affiliate thing. We just refer people to each other. We have a really great collaborative relationship. So I was already used to doing seminars, doing training, doing coaching. I mean, I was paying for it myself, and I was paying more money than I ever charge any of my clients. I mean, I've spent over $2 million on my marketing education at this point, probably more. And so, I'd been started this Platinum Plus group because here's what I found, Darius, is that you can give the person the information in a book. You can give a person the information in a course. When humans have to get together and dialogue with each other, what I found is that there's a lot of people today that call mastermind groups they call their groups masterminds. And the word mastermind has been ruined by a bunch of snake oil salespeople and a bunch of charlatans. I mean, there's great mastermind groups out there. There's great entrepreneur groups, and I'm not saying that. Our friend Vern Harnish is an example. Vern is great. There's a lot of really amazing groups, and the really amazing groups I refer people into them. Because Genius Network is not for everybody. It's and so we're one of the few groups in our interviewing process. We will refer people to more groups than probably any other group. Most people are trying to compete with each other. As far as I'm concerned, there's a shit ton of awesome stuff out there. And as a matter of fact, you can learn, you can learn in a tremendous education, watching videos online and listening to podcasts. There's all kinds of stuff out there. There's what happens though is there's monologue where someone's speaking to you or at you, and then there's dialogue where you actually get and you go and you meet someone and you talk. And my favorite form of learning is discussions, where I'm able to talk and have discussions. Like we're having a discussion right now, right? So I always liked interviews. I always liked discussions, and I liked group discussions where someone would throw out an idea, and I would like disagreements because I want to understand, why does someone see things the way they are? You don't change anyone's mind by arguing with them. You really try to look at their perspective. So I was always searching for perspectives. And at this point in my life, I've interviewed over 1,000 people for at least an hour and 90 minutes. So I've, quite a few billionaires. I've interviewed Richard Branson for hours and hours and hours. There's all kinds of different people. And so with Genius Network, I had been doing these platinum groups, but then a gal named Robin Robbins, who built a big marketing business for the IT industry. She's been a dear friend for many years. Early on, she asked if I would hire her for a job, and I knew she was an entrepreneur, and I'm like, no, you're not built to work for someone. You're built to run your own business. And so she built a massively successful business. And she had said to me, she had hired me for consulting back when I was doing more consulting. And at the time I was like $3,000 an hour, and I would do a minimum of 2 hours of consulting for $6,000. And after 2 hours, she said to me, she goes, why don't you start a platinum group for info marketers, people that are coaches, people that are speakers, people that sell courses, because that was a big part of the world that I understood and learned.
What year was this? This
was in 2006.
Okay. Got it.
So, and I had been having my Platinum Plus group going since like 2000, where I was, it was a group for service businesses. And And I had never done any general marketing stuff until a company called Nightingale Conant did a program with me in 2004. They were at the time the largest audio learning company in the world. And I ended up doing a marketing program with them, and it became the top selling marketing program of all time in their history. And it was called Piranha Marketing, the 7 Success Multiplying Factors to Dominate Any Market You Enter. People can still buy this course now on Audible because Audible purchased or licensed all of the Nightingale Conant materials. Even the War of Art, one of my favorite books by my buddy Stephen Pressfield, that audiobook exists because I introduced him to Nightingale Conant, and he recorded it himself at Nightingale Conant because I had talked him into doing it years ago. Thank God I did, because that's still to this day the book that I refer more than any other book. And I recently, did an interview with Stephen 20 years after the first time I interviewed him, which was, 19 years ago. It was in 2003 when I first interviewed him. But basically, so I just started dabbling with like teaching any business owner marketing principles, because I always say, if you have anything even more remotely sexy and exciting than carpet cleaning, you can probably learn from some of the things that I learned out how to market and how to sell. So Robin said to me,
can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Because what I've kind of picked up from this conversation, and for listeners, this is the first time I ever talked to Joe. So we have I'm learning all about your life in this conversation. One of the things I've heard you say is like, I don't know if it's having a faith or just an understanding that like one thing leads to another. Like I'm seeing like all this, like your story is a series of domino after domino after domino. That's like, that's really, it's a pretty circuitous. I don't know how you pronounce that word, but like for you to go from like gym membership to throwing papers to carpet cleaning to ending up, on a jet ski to figuring out that you're, love marketing to figuring out that you wanted to interview people in new masterminds. That is just like it's like the world's biggest pivot. It's amazing to hear it. Like, I'm a pretty entrepreneurial person that's been had my fair share of ups and downs. We talked earlier in the show, before the show, I was telling you, I met Vern. I was running a little company and I ended up growing a $200 million company, and all of it. When I tell my story, people are like, they say that I have the persistence of almost very few people, right? Like I just don't have a quit button. But man, that's what I'm hearing is like this one thing leads to another. Is there an element? My question for you on this is there like a belief of, hey, you just got to stay in the game and shit happens if you're doing the right stuff and treating people well? Like that's what I'm picking up from what you're saying.
Yeah. Okay. So to speak to what you're doing, so first off, let me give some fundamentals on that, how to think about it. First off, and I would talk to Gary Halbert about this, the world advances on the backs of its neurotics. Okay. So a lot of this crazy ass energy can either be all over the map and can lead to addiction and craziness, or if it's directed, could actually accomplish something. The world's highest achievers live with the highest levels of dissatisfaction. And I would use that as a badge of honor for a long time. Now I realize that that's kind of fucking stupid. And there are ways, and I learned, I got trained in transcendental meditation in 2013. And today I do saunas and cold plunging almost daily. I do, learned how to breathe. I do a lot of recovery work. When I quit going to so many marketing seminars is when my income actually got greater, because most people in marketing are magicians, but a lot of them are very episodic. And so, you're better off going a inch wide and a mile deep. And when I went into niche marketing, you realize that there's only a limited amount of people, so you have to go deep with those people. Don't burn bridges. One of the pieces of advice I give to young people is be nice to the people you meet on the way up. They're the same people you meet on the way down. That's a spin off of another quote that's not said exactly the same way, but very, very close, William Miser. And so in a nutshell, I look at everything as like a term from Dan Sullivan, founder of Strategic Coach, as a strategic byproduct. Everything in my life is a strategic byproduct of doing something else. So all the meandering and all of the things that you're referring to, if you say right now, 6 months from now, I'm going to run a 26-mile marathon, and you've never done it before, and you pick that date 6 months from today. So what'll happen is you'll probably quit eating as much crappy food. You're going to start obviously running and training. You may not hang out with certain friends that are out partying and drinking a lot or eating fast food or crappy food. So your diet's probably going to improve. You may meet some new friends. You're going to exercise. You're probably going to change your sleep habits. You're going to be more consistent. You're going to have a lot more, but you're going to change your biochemistry from running. You're going to come up with different insights. So all these things will happen off to the side as a result of you making a goal to run a marathon 6 months from now, right? And those are strategic byproducts. All these things that happen off to the side as a result of pursuing a goal or going down the path of be it entrepreneurship or new learning or going to another country or developing a spiritual practice or whatever. And so what happens is many people often are so fixated on, I want to get the girl, I want to get the guy, I want to get the goal, I want to get the whatever, the trophy, that they often miss all of the things that are happening off to the side as a result of the pursuit of the goal. And if you pay attention, the things that happen off to the side end up becoming far bigger than the goal you were pursuing in the first place. And somewhere along the way, I learned, and maybe it was because of Dan Sullivan, maybe it was because of all my reading, all my studying, is that winners find ways to win and losers find ways to lose. And so I look for all of the stuff that happens off to the side, and I'm like, then I will change course. And so in the pursuit of being a dead broke carpet cleaner, living on credit cards, trying to figure out how to eat, I discovered a methodology of marketing and I turned my small business around. But what occurred to me is all of the things that I was learning and studying about how to turn a carpet cleaning business around was coming from studying people that were in the direct mail business that didn't have the advantage of face-to-face, and they had to figure out how to write compelling words to convert people, in print that they never even met. And so I started thinking, how do I package up this stuff and sell it to other people? And how do I do it with a niche industry? Now, I'm good friends with Tony Robbins. Tony was around way back when, but the carpet cleaning industry could not afford the talent of a Tony Robbins. He wouldn't go, date for destiny for carpet cleaners. He can give a shit. Tony wants to be famous. Tony wants bodyguards surrounding him. Tony wants to be in stadiums filled with people. There's so much opportunity for people that go an inch wide and a mile deep. Right. So how to go into a niche, how to specialize. And so this is how a ADD, distractible, weird person, a neurotic person like myself can focus in on wherever there's a pain, wherever there's a need, figure out how to first solve it for myself. And then if you can solve it for yourself, you can maybe solve it for other people. So if you want to know how to make more money in the world, wherever there's anxiety, there's opportunity. Wherever there's pain in the world, if you can identify the pain, and people have to be willing to pay for it, and they have to have actually the desire to figure out how to do it. Even though you can argue that the world needs a lot of things, the world may not want to pay for some of those things. So part of for the entrepreneurs that are out there, for anyone that lives in a world where their income is based on their ability to produce a result, I understand when people say thought leader. People often refer to me as a thought leader, and I'm like, well, any idiot can come up with a thought. It doesn't take a genius to come up. You can steal other people's thoughts, and unfortunately, a lot of other people do steal. And I hate that because I'm a big believer in respecting people's IP and where ideas come from. So I'm always quoting people that I hear or learn things from because I think it's the right thing to do. I like result leaders. I like people that have the ability to produce a result. So whenever I've been able to produce a result in my life, I then think to myself, how could I share this or teach this to someone else? Because a really great teacher is not just someone that says things that sound good, it's the ability to transfer knowledge or methods or strategies or techniques to another human, and they can then take those and apply them in their life. And after I saw that I was doing that for many people, I realized, wow, I actually can build a whole business around this, and not just writing courses and doing audios and videos and stuff. I could actually bring the smartest people that do this together, introduce them to each other, and then I created a connection network. So today, my whole thing is about connecting people with ideas and other humans that will help them, expand and do things, and how to disconnect from toxic people. And so everything in my life now is elf versus half. What's easy, lucrative, and fun versus what's hard, annoying, lame, and frustrating. Because you can either have an elf business or you can have a half business. But there's a lot of little, it sounds like talking to a human pinball machine when you're talking to me and I'm trying to condense, 3 decades of stuff into what I think are sort of interesting scenarios. But what I do is I listen to what people complain about. I write about this in my book, What's in It for Them. Gary Chapman wrote the 5 love languages. And I was having a conversation with him years ago after an event where he was speaking. And he said, if you want to know what someone's love languages are, and he said this just to me, he said, if you want to know what someone's love languages are, listen to what they complain about. And I thought, a lot of people say complaining is a bad thing. And if you're a toxic complainer, it could be annoying to be around someone who's just bitching and complaining. But often when someone's complaining, they're crying out for help. So I really got in tune with the fact that be a pain detective. It's the first chapter of my book is like, if you want to help people, and bond with people and connect with people. Because the number one question I get, Darius, is like, how do you meet all these people? And it's not like, because I want pictures with every famous people. I've got more pictures with billionaires and famous people than I would ever need for PR. And that's all bullshit in a lot of ways. Just because you have a picture with someone or just because you met someone doesn't translate into opportunity. It's what you do with that. It's like, are you just meeting the person and they don't know you, or are you really friends with them? And so part of it is like, people always asking, how do you meet all these people? It's like, that's not the right question. The question is, what are you doing with them? And how do you, what leads to the opportunity? What is it you're trying to accomplish? And so part of it is, people are like, I want to change the world. Well, that's a bit of a cop out. Anyone can say, who doesn't want to change the world?
Of course.
I want to be an influencer. What are you influencing? Okay, right. Yeah, but I mean, there's no relationship between having like thousands or millions of likes and actually helping the world. I mean, there's what do you want to be known for? So part of it is, for me, I learned, who do I want to be a hero to? I want to be a hero to entrepreneurs, and I want to be a hero to people that struggle with addiction. And oftentimes they're the very same people, because some of the most driven, hardworking, accomplishing people live with trauma and grief and pain and angst, and it's real human suffering. And if I can help reduce human suffering for the high achievers of the world, I will make a far greater impact than trying to get everyone to know about me. Like, I don't want Genius Network to be known for me. I want Genius Network to be known for the people in the group. Last year, I took an entire year off as a sabbatical. The group ran without me. My team ran it. My members ran it. I wasn't even there. And it still worked. And I was like, holy shit. You can actually run a group if you have a process down, if you build a really good community of people that are friends and care about each other. And so now my goal is I want to have the greatest group of achievement-minded, non-narcissistic givers that come together and they help each other. And we work on good shit. If someone has a bad reputation, I don't want them in the group. If someone's a taker, I don't want them in the group. If someone can cut a check, I don't give a shit. All my clients are already wealthy and successful entrepreneurs. I want really genuine, awesome human beings. Is everyone perfect? Of course not. I mean, it's like the Star Wars bar. I mean, you're dealing with all these weird sort of characters. And as you know, entrepreneurs can be an often rowdy group of people. However, I believe we can build a better entrepreneur. I believe and it doesn't come from making more money. That's a byproduct of it. It comes from how do you solve one problem that solves 50 problems? Sometimes if you just sleep better, there's going to be 10 or 15 problems in your life that are going to disappear just because you have a better night's sleep. If you eat better, if you care about your family 5% more, if you put 5% more focus on some of your best friends, that whole term, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. Well, my friend Peter Diamandis says, the squeaky wheel gets replaced. Get rid of the half people, the hard, annoying, lame, and frustrating people, projects in your life, and free it up so you can have more ELF. And then put everything through the ELF filter. Learn ELF strategies. Hang out with ELF people. Be an ELF person. Ask the question, what's in it for them, not what's in it for you. Everyone that, so I started doing that. And here's the thing. I can do a lot of different businesses because I just apply that formula to different things. But my main thing is Genius Network. That's where most of my time is spent. And then I have a bunch of skunk projects. I own the town Cleator, Arizona, which is a 40-acre ghost town, which is like an art project for me and a few friends. And we're using that town to do art shows and for healing and for recovery. We're the first ghost town in the world to be in virtual reality. And my VR company that I'm a founder of called Genius X, if you have VR headsets, you can watch it on YouTube if you type in Cleater VR. There's all kinds of weird things we do, but they all integrate together. I'm an integrator. So I try to, and not integrator in the sense of visionary integrator like Gino Wickman writes about in Traction. Gino's a friend of mine, meaning I look at all of these things that don't seem to make sense, and I make them make sense, or I don't do them at all. So everything ties together. And that wasn't easy. It took here's the thing, and you already know this. Young people, like I said this at a seminar once, and Jack Canfield, one of the authors of Chicken Soup for the Soul series, he loved this line. When I said it, I was speaking at an event to a bunch of young entrepreneurs, and I said to them, if I would have known being successful was this much work, I would have stuck with being a loser. I mean, there's a lot to it, but what's the alternative? My friend who was paralyzed from the chest down, Dave Kekich, who died unfortunately last year at 78 years old, he said, life's easy when you live it the hard way and hard if you live it the easy way. There's lasting happiness does not come from consuming other people's values. It comes from developing your own. So no matter what I say or you say or Gary Vaynerchuk says or 7 Habits of Highly Effective People or any of the books you read or podcasts you listen to, take all of that in. But I tell everyone, treat it like a 12-step group. Take what you like and leave the rest. Don't ignore it if you need to hear it, but take it in and develop your own operating system. Ethics is the most important. Be a good human. Don't be an asshole. You will run into people 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now. And if you damage them, if you abuse them, if you leave scorched earth, if you rip them off, it will come back to you, I believe. If you've screwed people over, say you're sorry, make amends, except when to do so would injure them or others. Don't always think you're right. And everything I'm saying is stuff I've had to learn. I'm not preaching here. This is all shit I've had to tell myself. It's stuff I tell myself every day. It's just how I think about stuff. And let me say this for your podcast listeners. You can listen to a bazillion podcasts out there, but you will be better off mastering the work of one podcast than listening to 100 different ones. You're better off listening to one podcast that's really good and valuable several times than listening to 10 other ones at 2 times the speed, just so you can somehow convince yourself that you're shoving more information into your head. Like, go deep with things. We live in a world where most people are going very shallow. There's so much information. There's so much overwhelm. Master some. If you come across a podcast, and if Darius is someone that you really love, listen to all of his podcasts. Buy it, read his book. Go deep with whoever you resonate with. You're going to get further ahead that way than just trying to consume endless amounts of information. And that's not to say you shouldn't get different perspectives. You definitely should get different perspectives, but don't spread yourself too thin. And if I could go back in time, I would have gone a lot deeper with less things. I would have had a lot less tools in my toolbox. I would have dealt with my trauma way earlier on. I would have taken that stuff more seriously. But in spite of that, I built a great life, a great business, and I do a lot of cool shit. And for the first time, 20 years ago, I didn't love myself. I would beat myself up daily. Today, I have an amazing life.
I love it, man. So I know we're running a little short on time here, but so the book, I'm guessing a lot of these lessons that we've talked about so far in this episode are in the book, but would you mind kind of like just giving us kind of a quick synopsis of, what was the motivation for the book, who's the book for, and like high level, like what's the biggest value someone's going to get by picking up this book and reading it?
Yeah, the book was actually written for me to document what I do and how I do it, which sounds interesting. What's in it for them was written for me. I wrote it for, it's not a timely book. It's a timeless book. I hope it's around when I'm dead. I hope it wouldn't exist if it wasn't for How to Win Friends and Influence People, because I love that book by Dale Carnegie. However, what I realize, it's not about winning friends and influencing people. It's about winning the right friends and influencing the right people. It's about aligning yourself with people that are aligned with you. The people that will not like my book are people that are takers, because I talk shit about them in the book. I talk shit about the activity of being a taker. I tell what I did right, which has worked for me, but I also share cautionary tales of what not to do, because I spent a lot of my life helping people. Because that, I love the line by Zig Ziglar, but you got to take it in context. You can get anything you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want. That's not actually true. You can help other people get what they want in life that won't do a damn thing for you, and some of them will abuse you. So you got to do the right things for the right people, because if you help the right people get what they want in life, you will get what you want. And so it's about,
I love that.
It's about developing your spidey senses. And there's everything from how to connect with people, how to market if you're single, how to use marketing to find a love relationship. That's a really great, very interesting chapter that came from a love coach that I have all kinds of additional videos and interviews of the book that you don't have to buy a course. It all comes with the book that people can watch if they want to go deeper with any of the concepts. And every chapter ends with dominoes, so that I give people specific dominoes that they can do that will help them deepen their relationship. But ultimately, it's a capability book to give people capabilities on how to connect with themselves and other people. Because if you're disconnected with yourself, it's going to be really hard to connect with other people. So there's a lot of stuff about dealing with your own pain, dealing with your own shit, meeting people in ways that are real and authentic, and how to deal with fear and shyness and intimidation. And basically, what I would say is it's a capability book that is disguised because it's really a character book. I want people to really look at their character, because one of the best ways to get the most out of life is to feel really amazing about waking up every day and knowing you're doing good in the world, and having your intentions be matched with your actions, because we judge others by their actions. We judge ourselves by our intentions. And if your actions are not congruent with your intentions, then you're not going to be a happy person, and you're going to let people down. So that's the whole synopsis. People can get the book at what'sinitforthem.com. If someone, is a taker, I guarantee you're not going to like this book. But if you are a giver, it will teach you how to be a more powerful, empowered, boundaried giver, so that you don't waste your time, attention, money, effort, and energy, which is chapter 2, Tammy. Time, attention, money, effort, and energy on the wrong people, and you can highly leverage yourself and just have a better life. So that's just spiel on my book.
I love that. So I haven't said this to you, but I have a saying which I think you might appreciate in whatever I work with entrepreneurs now a lot, and I always tell them I have a perspective with growing business, and it aligns 100% with what you're saying, and it's with how do I interact with my team, how do I interact with the client, how do I interact in life, and I call it the give twice, take once. I always give twice before I consider even taking, and that way I always know that I've done my part. So you made me think about that. I'm like, you and I are 100% aligned that it's all around the give. And I have a good friend. We were talking about this, and that Adam Grant talks about that there's just people that are takers, to your point. And I love the fact that your book goes into how to steer clear of them, because I think a lot of people, especially like, I'll use myself as an example. I'm a person that's like a assume best intent type person. And as I've grown older, I've been like, yes, but to your point, what are my like? Do you want to really give to everybody and then have them take without any intention of giving, and that makes you just feel like shit. You're like, well, why the hell why did I do that? And I love this perspective of, and I think it dovetails into who you are as a human and what you've built with Genius Network, which is surrounding yourself with the right type of people who are givers themselves. That becomes a synergistic effect. So I'm super excited for your book, man. I'm really I just finished my 31st book for the year. I'll finish my 32nd book, and your book's going on top of my list for 2023. So I'm excited to read that and to knock that out, and get to spend some time with you and your writings.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, man, this has been really fun having you on the show. I always like to end the show with a question, though, because we are the Greatness Machine. The show is actually built out of, you had said you'd gone to TED. I was a TEDx curator. And I got introduced to TED from our mutual friend Cameron Harold after he did his TEDx talk. I became a curator. I went to TED myself, and the show is really born out of that experience of wanting to kind of take the curation of a TEDx and turn it into a show and around people living their passions to create greatness in the world. And one of the things I love to ask all of our guests, I want to ask you the same question, which is, I think that there's so many barriers to creating greatness in the world. I'd love to hear what you feel is the number one barrier to greatness that you overcome, and how have you overcome it to create greatness in your life?
Yeah, I think let me think off the top of my head. when it comes to marketing and business, I would say one of the biggest barriers is undervaluing the importance of marketing, selling, and persuasion, right? Because you don't, like that old Carras negotiation seminar group, they used to run these ads in airport airplane magazines and stuff that said, you don't get in life what's fair, you get what you negotiate. So for one, learning the ability to sell and persuasion is very important because the world always needs persuasive people, but people that are persuading and using ethical marketing. You know, Dr. Robert Cialdini is a dear friend of mine. He endorses my book. He's read the whole thing. Chris Voss, same thing. Chris Voss is one of my Genius Network members. So, there's that sort of stuff. So basically, that's the part of business, I would say, is just the biggest barrier is you don't take it seriously. That in life, it's your health. There's that proverb, which is, he or she who has their health has 1,000 dreams. He or she that does not have their health has only one. So the reason we're able to sit here and talk to each other right now is because we're not laid up in a hospital bed. And so the number one barrier of even, what is more important, like, I know a lot of wealthy people. I spend half my time with addicts, and I know a lot of very famous, very successful people that I've met in rooms that no one would ever know that struggle with addiction, right? And you can have all the money in the world, all the fame, all the status, but if you lose your health, you would give every penny of that back. And there's at least 1 billion, 2 billion, 3 billion people on the planet that their dreams would come true to switch places with me and you and most of the people listening to this right now. It would be their dream come true for even a day to switch places. So what I would say is one of the biggest barriers is just not having the awareness of the gifts that you have sitting in front of you and leveraging those. Like I will say to young entrepreneurs that have not, like, how many of you in the room are worth $1 million? And sometimes, I did this years ago, the first time I did, I've now done it several times. I was in this room with about 800 young entrepreneurs. And I said, how many of you, worth $1 million? One guy in the back raises that. Anyone here worth 5 million? Same guy. I go, how many of you in this room would pluck out an eyeball right now if I gave you $1 million? No one raises their hand. Anyone, 5 million? No. I go, anyone lop off a leg for 50 million? No. I go, interesting. You all have something that's worth $1 million and you didn't think you were worth $1 million till I asked you that question. You have your vision. You have the ability to talk. You have the ability to listen to music. You have the ability to go look at nature. Most of you can walk and drive cars. Like, don't for a moment think you're not already wealthy. There are people that don't have these things in the world. And so some of the biggest barriers to success, to answer the question, is you're not using the tools you have. Use your vision, use your ears, use your voice, and get the hell out of environments that are tearing you apart and appreciate life. And that's hard if you're stressed out. That's hard if you're abusive, you're Trump. So deal with the shit that is like, silent battles are the hardest battles to fight. You're as sick as your secrets. The biggest barrier is people have pain and angst inside of them, and they keep it inside and they implode and they're contracted. And so do things with people and activities that expand you, and quit doing things that contract you and contract other people, and walk through the world with what's in it for them is the question. And if you help people, believe it or not, it will come back to you. That's the best thing that I know how to overcome barriers, is to just have that mindset approach.
I love it, man. So what's in it for them.com is where they can get the book. Did I get that correct?
Yeah. And look, people can find me anywhere with my name. Joe Polish, like nail polish is my last name, spelled the same way as Polish, but I pronounce it Polish. So my Twitter handle, Instagram, my website, it's all Joe Polish, is Facebook, whatever. But I don't do a lot of social media, even though I have a lot of people that follow me. And but yeah, the best thing that, if someone doesn't want to pay for my book, they can get a free book at joesfreebook.com, which is my book, Life Gives to the Giver. But I hope that people get my book, What's in It for Them. The proceeds of that book go to my foundation, Genius Recovery. And if anyone struggles with recovery, I have geniusrecovery.org. It's all free. It's all educational stuff, and it's just stuff to help people. And I have an open letter on that site that gives my viewpoints on addiction. So if anyone's struggling with addiction and needs help, there's lots of resources at Genius Recovery. But yeah, and Darius, I appreciate you, pimping my book and promoting it. It's I hope people like it, and if they like it, share it with other people. I think the world needs this sort of message right now. We need more givers in the world, because there's a lot of fear porn that's being shoved out in the world right now through leaders that are really kind of not good people. Many of them are not doing good in the world right now. And I hope that the givers of the world are more empowered so they can protect themselves from all the bullshit that is out there. There's a lot of takers that are swarming around.
Yeah, I love that, man. Well, so you guys heard it here, what'sinitforthem.com. Check that out. And as well as any of the other things that Joe's working on, check out the Genius Network, Genius Recovery, if you're in that boat and you need some help, and get the free book. So with that said, man, Joe, I can't believe it took this long to actually get to meet you. Hopefully I'm going to meet you in person. My brother lives in Paradise Valley, or he just moved to North Scottsdale. So
yeah, hit me up when you're out here, and we will. We have a lot of mutual friends, but that's the thing. We really, eventually it comes around. And this only went too long because I know I ramble about a lot of stuff. So
no, it's all good. It's all good. It's a great show. I'm really excited for the book, and huge gratitude to have you spend your time with our audience, teaching them about all your amazing learnings. Your story is freaking unbelievable, and I'm so excited for the value you're creating and continuing to create in the world. And much love, man. Super grateful to have you today.
Much love to you, man. Good luck to everyone out there. Thank you.
Thank you. And listen, audience, if you love this episode, please share it. Leaders are givers. Share the episode with friends that need to hear it. Give us a rating. Give us a review. This is the only way that the Greatness Machine can get out there, is if more people know about it. So with that said, we love you. Peace out. Take care. You are listening to The Greatness Machine, and that's a wrap for today. Listen, if you love what you heard, subscribe to the show on whatever podcast platform that you're tuning in on, so that you don't miss any of our future episodes. We have tons of great people coming on, and we're stoked to have you here to enjoy it with us. Leave us a review. Tell us what you love most about this particular episode. We love getting the reviews. We love to see what you guys love most. And if this particular episode, made you think of someone who's leveling up in their business and in their life, print screen, share it with them. Leaders are the best givers, and after all, we're all here to support and grow with each other. And in case you want to see some of the fun behind the scenes shots or some of the things that we're doing, I'm actually writing about this in my weekly newsletter. Go to www.therealdarius.com and subscribe to my newsletter. We're talking about fun things like business and life and mindfulness and cryptocurrencies and gosh, I don't even know, everything and anything, but it's tons of fun stuff I write about. I try to get it out on a weekly basis. You can subscribe at www.therealdarius.com. And with that said, look, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you. I love you. Peace. We're out of here. See you guys on the next one.
She's my lover.